Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our virtual Iowa Quiltscape Tuesdays at 12 series. Today we are joined by Rachael Dorr, Paula Nadelstern, and Ruth Marchese from the Manhattan Quilters Guild. We have several other people who are on as well from the Guild, and we may get a chance to talk to them a little bit later. But these are our featured guests today, and we're so excited to hear about the Manhattan Quilters Guild and the quilts that these three artists have in our current exhibit here at the Iowa Quilt Museum. Just a real quick bit about the Iowa Quilt Museum. If you're not familiar with our organization yet, we are located in Winterset, Iowa, which is just southwest of Des Moines, the capital city in Iowa. And Winterset is a beautiful town of about 5,500 residents. We are the county seat of Madison County. And if you're thinking that Madison County sounds familiar, it's because of that really famous book and movie from the 1990s, The Bridges of Madison County. That is us. So we have these beautiful covered bridges as a tourist attraction and a scenic part of our community. Winterset is also the birthplace of John Wayne. So there's a museum here dedicated to his honor. And then of course, the Iowa Quilt Museum. We would invite any of you to come and visit us in person. But today we are online to hear a little bit about quilts from our contemporary art quilts exhibit of the Manhattan Quilters Guild. So let me introduce my guests this morning. We have Rachael Dorr and Paula Nadelstern and Ruth Marchese. I should have them all spotlighted right now. And so I'm hoping that one of you would be willing, maybe Rachael, you, to just give us a little bit of an overview of the Manhattan Quilters Guild and what makes this guild, this group of artists special and unique, and a teeny tiny snippet of the history of your group. Would you mind doing that? Or maybe Paula or Ruth, anyone?
I mean, I would suggest maybe, I could give you my opinion, but I know that Paula has been there much longer than I have and would probably give a more concise history.
Older than you are, but yeah, so the exhibit is aptly titled because it is 40 by 40 at 40, and it is our 40th anniversary. We began as a guild when someone put in, our leader, who has passed away sadly, Karen Birkenfeld, put an ad in a quilters newsletter magazine, who wants to come quilt in my, have a quilting bee in my living room, and 40 years ago, and on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And over the years, our personality has changed, our focus has changed. We've moved from that bee where we all just brought food and to an art quilt group that critiques each other's work. You are invited into the guild. We've had various different kinds of ways that members have joined, and but at this point, it's really an invitation to join. We're about, I don't know, Rachael or Ruth, we're about 22 people now.
21.
21. So we like to stay small so that everyone has a chance to meet. We meet in a space that we rent, that we pay for. We have found that that's an important part of the critique situation, because nobody is the hostess, nobody has to provide food. We all can equally see and what's going on. And since the pandemic, we have been meeting via Zoom. We started with a once a month Zoom in the beginning, and we realized we loved each other and missed each other and wanted to meet once a week. So whoever can, we basically have a quilt bee, where we, or a Zoom bee. And we just, whoever, you bring work every Wednesday night, and we talk, and we've gotten even closer during the pandemic, because once a month we have that professional meeting where we make sure we see what everyone's working on. But it's a good group. And over the years, we've had about 6 different exhibits showcasing our signature styles. It's just interesting how everybody has continued in a kind of style. And this is our latest, and we're very honored to be here.
Well, and we're very honored to be hosting this exhibit. We were talking just a little bit before the program started, and we've had wonderful attendance here at the Iowa Quilt Museum to see the exhibit in person. And of course, we're still offering some virtual opportunities for folks who can't come to Iowa to see it. One of those, we had a lovely online presentation 3 weeks ago now by Meg Cox, who is a member of the Guild. And she gave a very nice presentation on the history of the group and some of the members who have been with the group for a long time. And if you missed that presentation, you're still able to see that online, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. But what we really want to talk today is about the quilts that these three artists have in our exhibits. And we want to hear about them as artists and exhibitors and members of the Manhattan Quilt Guild. So now I will pass it over to you, Rachael, if you don't mind. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who and where you are, maybe how you got started quilting, and kind of what you consider to be that signature style for yourself?
Well, I am a mother of three, and I'm based in New York. And I started quilting really in a response to somebody asking me to make a memorial quilt for a family who had lost their father in the Iraq War. And I made a quilt from his soldier's uniform. And that sort of started me down a path which led me to start a charity called Quilting a Memory. And in order to process these large quilts for the families, I purchased a long arm quilting machine. And that in turn led me down this whole path into just falling in love with free motion quilting, which has really sort of taken over my life to some extent. And I'm just sort of obsessed now with the textures and the shapes and the patterns that I can create with that long arm quilting machine. And so in my art background, I was very focused on minimalist artists. And I love the color white. I have a very strong response to color. It confuses me sometimes. I mean, I love color, but it makes me sort of panic somewhat. So I've just completely removed color from most of my work, and I just concentrate with creating textures using the long arm quilting machine.
So that's a wonderful segue. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the picture of your quilt from the 40 by 40 exhibit. Sorry, I was at the back of the slideshow. So this is the piece that you made for this 40 by 40 exhibit. And we should explain to everyone maybe who is not familiar. The quilts all are 40 inches by 40 inches. And then of course it's the 40th anniversary. Right. So this is yours. I had to look up how to pronounce it. Eukaryotes. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, it's a name for a selection of cells, or a cell like body, but they're never the same shape. So it's a sort of biological term to recognize cell-like structures.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that primarily I use recycled materials in my work. So this one is made from a bed sheet and from some old clothing that I have. And it's made using repetitive shapes, both with the circle motif and with those funny free form cut cell-like motifs with the triangle in the middle. And there's some pretty crazy quilting that goes on in there.
I don't know if everyone will be able to see the quilting in great detail with this screen share or not. I hope that you can, because really it's really wonderful. Not a whole cloth quilt per se, but has a lot of those same characteristics because of so much negative space in which you can quilt. Right.
And I do, all the quilting is done by hand. It's not a computer. Lots of people ask if it's a computer, but it's freehand on the long arm.
That's amazing. Paula was just telling us before we started the program that you quilted a piece for her. Yes. And she's just getting to see that for the first time, and she's very excited. So obviously your talent as a long armer has earned you some fame within this group.
Well, it's taken me by surprise how much I love it. And we've been in the Catskills now for maybe 3.5 weeks, and I am missing my machine hugely. So, yeah.
Do you piece or work on other projects while you're away from your long arm, or are you just kind of taking it?
I actually, I have a sewing machine here, and I have 2 looms. So I'm actually creating fabric out of discarded fabric. So I'm weaving fabric from strips of discarded fabric, which I hope to then create into, you know, another quilted piece, perhaps with long arm quilting on top of that. But that's something I'm exploring while we're up here.
Wonderful. I'm going to take a moment to say something I should have before we started, is that please feel free to use the chat window. Any of our guests today, I'll keep an eye on that chat window. And if we have some things that we want to interject or ask as we're going through the program today, we'll be very happy to do that. This is a very informal kind of presentation. So it's just, I like to think of it as all of us sitting around having coffee together and talking about our quilts. And it's my job just to kind of keep the conversation going. So let's take a look at, or let's kind of pass the ball over to Ruth rather. And Ruth, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to quilting? And you're in Brooklyn right now. Did I remember that correctly?
Yes, I am in Brooklyn. And I was born and raised in Switzerland and learned how to sew in school. That was mandatory at the time for our school. And actually, that serves me well at the moment. But when I moved over to the United States, I had an office job, which was quite boring. So I started sewing. My mother used to sew. And once the kids came along, I made some wall quilts with animals on it. We made stories, we told stories about them. And I think in 1989, there was a competition from the Folk Art Museum, which I participated in. And I was semifinalist, I didn't get in. But that gave me the courage to continue. And I really have no art background and I have no quilting background. When I started, I didn't really know what a quilt block was. That was maybe good and bad, I don't know. But I guess I was free to just explore. And I didn't make bed quilts, so I could use any kind of material that I wanted, just for the texture, the color, or whatever. And then in 2008, I took a workshop with Jung-Gi Lee, who is a Korean bourgeoisie artist, a contemporary one. And because I wanted to learn how to sew transparent fabrics, which is really a challenge, organza, polyester, or silk. And that took me into a completely different direction. And the result is the piece that I have in the show, which is silk organza. Usually I use polyester because it's not light sensitive. I made a lot of window coverings because it looks like stained glass when you have it in the window and the sun comes through. This piece is about Korea. In 2016, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Korea. And this represents the colors that I saw in the traditional costumes. I don't know whether I mentioned it's silk. And the letter is on the left side is Seoul, and on the right side is Pyongyang. And it has to do with, at the time, I think this was in 2017 or 18, of the attempt to reunify the two Koreas. And that's the story of the quilt.
And the title of it is Tying Up Loose Ends. And so Ruth, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Can you tell us about, there are actually loose ends
yes.
on the quilts?
Yes.
Is that always part of the Bojagi style, or is that just a specific?
It can be used as a decoration. And for me, it was just part of the title. It sort of reinforced the whole, the purpose of, or the idea for this quilt. And yes, these are threads that deliberately are hanging and should be tied. Mm-hmm. But
So when I unpacked the quilt, don't panic when I say this, Ruth, when I unpacked the quilt and I noticed the first loose thread, I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to go get a pair of scissors and snip this off. And then thankfully I saw that there were many more, and then I just took a step back and no. But you know, sometimes a newly made quilt comes to us and it just has a little piece of thread still attached to it. So. But your quilt is safe, I promise.
That has happened to me before. I've made a big quilt, and I deliberately left the threads hanging. And when I sent it to my friend in Switzerland to the exhibit, it was later sold. She told me the same story. She saw it first, and she was just about ready to cut off those threads when she realized that may be part of the design. So she didn't.
These instincts.
So you're not the only one.
Okay, good. That does make me feel better.
Sorry about that. I should have probably warned everybody that they're all loose threads and they're meant to be loose threads.
Yes. Well, you know, the thing is with art quilts and contemporary quilts especially, there are things that are different than our traditional quilts. And so we just have to kind of remove our assumptions about what is supposed to and not supposed to be there.
Right.
So we have to think about that.
The one thing that fascinates me with Bourgeois, and like I said, I usually use polyester organza, is that first of all, polyester, you can burn the edges. So you have the raw edges, just this sort of bead, and they don't go, and it's uneven. And the stitching for the polyester organza is much thinner. The seams are much skinnier. And when you hang it away from the wall and there's the light that hits it, it creates a pattern on the wall, which this piece doesn't do as much because it's silk and it's slightly thick.
It's a beautiful piece, and we've sure enjoyed, as from a museum standpoint and from an education standpoint, I really appreciate the fact that these quilts in general, and yours specifically, Ruth, kind of opens up the conversation of what is a quilt and how can we define that. And it's different than our predecessors in the historical bed quilts and wall hangings, but it's still very much pulls on those same influences.
Well, I guess in that sense, it's not a quilt because it's just one layer.
Right.
And that has caused some headaches for me because it kind of limits the possibilities of exhibiting in quilt venues because it's not a quilt. But anyway.
We're willing to extend our definition.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Paula Nadelstern, let's pass things to you. If I can get all of my spotlights sorted here. Paula is coming to us from Long Island today. And all of these artists actually have 2 quilts in the exhibit right now. We are focusing first on the quilts that's part of the 40 by 40 exhibit, but they all also sent us an additional piece. We requested those because we had more space, so we got to show more quilts, and they gratefully put together an additional portion of the exhibit for us. So Paula, tell us about yourself and how you came to quilting and what it is that you do with your quilting journey.
Okay, well, I made my first quilt in 1969. I was at college with a $25 Singer featherweight, which was a year younger than I am. And I took all my clothes, ripped them up, turned it into, 10-inch squares, sewed it back together, thought it was a quilt. And so I've been quilting quite a while. I was at the local guild last week. They were all meeting at the rec hall here in this rural part of Long Island. And I mentioned that, and the woman next to me said, oh, I was born in 1969. So I have been quilting a while. In 1986, I found a beautiful piece of fabric, a piece of Liberty of London fabric. And I had this idea that it was going, that it had symmetry to it. I didn't know really that I was looking at symmetry. I just had this idea that I'd be able to cut the pattern, this Liberty expensive piece of fabric, into a triangle, make 8 identical triangles, call it a, you know, it would turn into a kaleidoscope. So I just sort of fell down that rabbit hole. I just fell in love with the pattern. I consider myself a patternista. I love, you know, along with the idea of working in a kaleidoscope shape, I also just love putting pattern to pattern to pattern to pattern, as much pattern as possible. Along the unexpected journey of becoming, you know, a teacher on the circuit, I also have been designing fabric for over 20 years for Benetex. And again, I create fabric with a lot of pattern and color. I wear black, but my fabrics are made of as many colors as possible. And now that we're printing digitally, I can use as many colors as possible. It's quite an eye opener. So the quilt that you're going to show, I believe, is the 43rd or 44th in my kaleidoscopic series. I also do simple quilts that made from complex fabric, and I've written a book about that, and I enjoy that process too. What's really, and I will say that although I am on the North Fork of Long Island right now for the summer and enjoying it very much, I do make my quilts on the same block in the Bronx where I was born, on the 9th floor in a rather small space. So this quilt, my 40 by 40, does use only my fabrics, although not all my quilts do, but I do like my fabrics. There are a couple of other prints in there. In fact, I believe there's a print in there by someone from in the audience. I saw that my very good friend, Wendy Richardson, is watching today, and I'm grateful for Wendy for coming. And I do have 1 or 2 of her overdyed prints or olive greens in someplace in the background. So Wendy is represented. Wendy's company is called Quilt Tapestry Studios. So this is a really different quilt for me. It's more conceptual than many of my others because, you know, a kaleidoscope is made up of repetitive triangles that all meet in the center. And typically there's 360 degrees. You take 360 degrees, divide it by 8 or 6 or some number like that. And then you make identical wedges. So these are identical wedges. However, it's a little hard for me to say this. I had this idea since I'm using my own fabrics. I have, so for each pattern that I make, there are usually 3 colorways of the same fabric, sometimes 4 colorways of the fabric of that pattern. So I had this idea to make identical wedges and use the same motif, but one time I'm using the motif from the red group. One time I'm using the motif from the blue group. One time it's, you know, from the multi group. And so I didn't exactly understand what was going to happen either. So you're seeing that same pattern as the 6-sided kaleidoscope, you know, the hexagons move around, but you're seeing different, but something different happens. So it's not as static as sometimes the patterning can be. And then I sort of slipped it into this background that's all pieced together of, they're based on Matt Schlien's paperwork. I really love that. He does this unbelievable Schlian, and he's an unbelievable paper artist. And I sort of was using some of the shapes. I had permission from him to kind of play with the kind of shapes that he does. I mean, if he saw this, he would not understand that I referenced his pieces, but to me they do. So that is really the story of the 43rd, 44th. This summer, I'm starting the 45th in the series. And I believe you have the example of my 2nd or 3rd, right?
Yes, this is number 2.
Number 2, yes. And this was, so before I met that gorgeous piece of Liberty of London fabric in '86, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was doing a lot, you know, I was doing lots of applique work. And that's really how I transitioned from doing little applique blocks and little applique imagery into the, so these are really the second group of kaleidoscopes, using a lot of Liberty of London fabric and some others. The techniques are the same as what I use now, although I've gotten a lot more complex in how I look at fabric and how I understand how to make the kaleidoscope look like it's surprise and magic and change and chance. I have a big collection of kaleidoscopes. I've spoken and been friends with actual state-of-the-art kaleidoscope makers. This is called Once Upon a Box of Crayons. When I was a little kid, my box of 64 crayons, which I would get like one a year, you know, it seemed like it's such a treat, was my favorite toy. I would only lend my best friend the magenta, because the magenta, you know, needed to stay nice and sharp, and it was so important to me. And I was really careful not to show the image of the Crayola, you know, motif on that box, because I was careful of copyright, like they would really care. This was the New York State winner of the second Great American Quilt Festival. The Memories of Childhood was the theme. I was also the winner of the first Great American Quilt Festival when I met Marianne Fonz, and we've been, you know, from Winterset, and I've been to Winterset because of Marianne a couple of times, and we were, you know, we become really, we cherish that friendship. But this was my quilt, and so the images are very specifically images that's I think speak of childhood. If you start at the top, kids are interested in mythical creatures, and then, you know, dragon, and then underneath that is that heart is the interested in underwater animals, a developing sense of humor. It is a clown, and then the woman over on the right there, yeah, she's that. Is she a witch? Is she a princess? Is she, you know, she's magical somehow? The peacock's the animal kingdom. And then underneath that, there's those little, I forgot the name of those dolls, but it's just that fascination with the concept of infinity. And then we got the sun, the moon, and the stars. So it's a patchwork of all sorts of stuff. And that's really where, you know, so you're seeing from the second to the 43rd or 44th in my collection, in my kaleidoscopic. I think the biggest gift I gave myself, without, and many of us in the Guild, without realizing it, I don't also come from out of an art background, was working in a series. You know, I didn't realize when I first had the idea to do, a second and then a third kaleidoscope quilt, I thought I was making a mistake. I thought, oh no, you should dabble, you should know, you should be, you know, do this and do this. And yet, you know, it is that idea of working in a series when you get to try out all those what if questions, and you just keep, you know, shaping that path with that, you know, that's, I think, was really the best thing I ever did for myself.
I noticed that several members of the group have done that series that series exploration. And so that's an interesting way to think about that, is it gives you time to just, you know, flesh out an idea completely. And then
two quilts later, you go back, you know, and you add a little bit of that idea with a new idea, and you just, you know, keep, you know, if someone ever asks me, and trust me, they ask an awful lot, like, how long did it take? Because, you know, I will, if I think the person can handle the answer without thinking I'm a facetious New Yorker, I'll answer my whole life. You know, like each of my quilts took my whole life to make, because every single quilt led to, you know, these ideas. In fact, there's something in that first quilt that I noticed, and, you know, that's something I continue to use, and an idea that I continue to play off of all of the time. But, you know, I mean, certainly a quilt takes a year or 6 months or 15, you know, that, but really, you know, we're all coming, every time we sit down at the table, we're bringing all the information that we've accrued over many years. And so working in a series of, you know, does allow you to do that, to pick up those threads.
Mm-hmm. Paula, I'll mention right now that we're going to be back online with you in just a week and a half, August 6th. You're giving us your full kaleidoscopic slide presentation as an online lecture. And so I know we'll hear lots more about your journey through the kaleidoscopic series and how you approach that. But as I was preparing for that, I was really struck by one comment you had in your description, and that historians believe that the patchwork style of quilt making resulted from a limited amount of space. And so we could make a block and we could make a block and we didn't have to have so much space. And you talked about how your style has kind of.
My kaleidoscope style, since it's, my block is a triangle. And so I basically work on one triangle. It can be 5 inches, it can be 50 inches, but I don't, and then I put them, all the triangles together, all the wedges. And then, so I have no idea what it'll look like looking in a kaleidoscope until the end. But I think that definitely, you know, the fact that I had such limited space and my personality of not really wanting to know what it looks like at the end, and my personality of wanting every single fabric in the world right this very second and every single quilt, yeah, it's all added up. But I do think that that has legitimacy.
I have a question.
One more thing. So historically, that researchers have also think that so the kaleidoscope the actual kaleidoscope was invented in Scotland and came to the United States, little toys, those little parlor toys. And everybody could afford one of those little parlor toys. So they were very common and came from England, you know, it didn't get, the man who invented it didn't copyright it. So a man named Bush actually was the one who brought it to America, and there are Bush scopes in the United States, you know, his antiques. But they say that quilters, you know, were not making circular quilts until basically the kaleidoscope came across the ponds and came to the United States, and not, you know, and when people actually saw the kaleidoscope, and then women were making more quilts in a circle.
Sure. Interesting to think about the outside influences on different forms.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth, let's go back to you again, if we could, because I want to take a look at the second piece you have. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was just going to skip you if you needed to take that call.
No, I didn't take any calls. This was probably a crank call anyway. I get them all the time.
Yes. The robots and the
rings, and eventually the answering machines picks up. But anyway, that's not related. Sorry.
It's quite all right. So let's take a look at your second piece, Ruth. And this is, again, not a quilt, but a beautiful piece, this vest. And do you say Jai or G's vest?
G's.
Oh, G.
G. This is our son's wife now. And 2 years ago for Christmas, they came to visit us. Our son lives in China. And she's Chinese, and they came to visit, and it was cold. It was over Christmas, and she was cold. So I had a vest that had sort of a fuzzy lining. I gave it to her, and it really looked good on her. And I had just finished another piece with a lot of these colors. And I thought, I also was going to participate in the Bujaki Forum in Seoul. That was going to be in 2020. And Jungi Lee, who organized it, she was asking for a piece of garment. And I hadn't really made any garments in a long time, but I looked at this vest and I thought, I could use some of these pieces. Of course, it was much more involved than it should have been and that I anticipated. It's polyester. And it's the Bujaki piecing that I use. And I really I'm pleased with the way it came out. It was a headache. That's putting it mildly. But because I had to figure out how to make the closure, and of course it's not a pattern from anywhere. I took it from that original vest that I had made as well. And then it's on a bias, which added another layer of complexity and headache. But I like it. And when she comes next time, which hopefully is going to be soon, she's going to get it.
Now, do I remember correctly that you said with the polyester, you can make the seams smaller than you did with the silk?
Well, you can do it with the silk too. It's somewhat easier. These seams are sewn 3 times. It's a special way of sewing it. It's I can't explain it too well. I'm a hopeless teacher. So they are very skinny because you cut close to the edge and then turn it over. So it's a totally sealed seam. It has it can't fray. And the edges along the bottom and the neck and the armholes is like a binding. And there the binding, I think it's on the outside. I burned it so that it's sealed and it looks irregular. Now I had some people horrified because when I discovered that I could burn the edges, I didn't have a proper tool. So in my studio with all the fabric, I used a candle. And that even became too dicey for me. So I have a wood burning tool, a small one that I use for that.
What an interesting technique. I've not heard of that before. And I imagine.
They don't use a candle to burn it though. It's not a good idea.
I'm guessing that some of our viewers today will be researching the Bojagi style and how they might learn more about that.
Yeah, I really have to give a lot of credit to this workshop that I took with Jung-Yi Lee. She wrote a couple of books and she's an excellent teacher. She is a wonderful artist. I think at the moment she is in Seoul, that's her home, but she was teaching at RISD in Rhode Island. So I've been fortunate enough to participate in, I think, all of her Bojagi forums that she organized in Korea. And one time I was able to go myself.
Wonderful. Okay, we have one more quilt on our slideshow today, and that is Rachel's. And then we will open things up for some questions or comments or wherever we want the conversation to lead. Let me get my spotlights here. And this quilt is causing Rachael a little bit of reverse homesickness. I don't know what to say, reverse homesickness, because her daughter Charlotte is away at sleepaway camp right now, the beautiful little girl in this picture. But tell us more about this quilt, Rachael. It's fascinating. I love it.
Well, it is a memory quilt. Again, my fascination with using clothes rather than material. So it's all the baby pajamas that Charlotte wore as a baby up until about two years old. So if you look really closely, you'll see that it's baby pajama material. And I wanted to make a memory quilt of her. And at the time, my friend Luke Haynes was staying with me, and he's quite famous for doing the portraits of himself. And he was kind enough to teach me how to make a portrait of my daughter. And he was actually the person who introduced me to Paula Nadelstern and the Guild. So he is responsible somewhat in my joining the Guild. He was also a member at one point, I think. And then the pattern on the quilting pattern is just a simple, what I call a simple sort of swirl and feather. So I do swirls and feathers. And then for the portrait, I do a very fine zigzag around each of the pieces to make sure that they stay down. And then I like to do tiny stipple pebbling just to make the portraits really lay flat. And I've used this technique in a couple of memory quilts for like commissions for people. And I really like the pebbles because it creates a texture, but from afar it looks completely flat, and I like flat on the quilt, so I don't like the wrinkles. So yeah. Some people might say I quilt too much because often my quilts are quite stiff because of the quilting, but it's just, I guess I'm sort of really like the even texture across the whole quilt.
So I'm trying to get in close. The portrait starts to get a little bit less recognizable as we get very close.
Right, that's what's really strange about portrait quilting, is I think that you can you know, from afar, you see you see what it is, and then when you get up close, you see that the shapes are really quite abstract. And that was really surprising when Luke taught me this particular technique. And so when you're making the shape of the head or the hair, you can sort of follow the pattern that is made by using the photograph. This is based off a photograph. But when it comes to the eyes and the nose, you can't really use the photograph. You then have to start, you know, making the shapes yourself and standing back and taking a photo and being like, does that look right? And then coming back again, because it's really the eyes and the nose and the mouth area that makes it a portrait. And sometimes just using the photograph, you don't get that accurate, the accurate shapes. So I find that that's the hard bit with the portraits.
We've seen lots, or I've heard lots of comments about this quilt. People very curious about that portrait technique. And then again, lots of comments on the quilting that I wanted people to be able to see as I zoomed in. I think you were telling us right before we started that you do all of this freehand. And so for the stippling, you're just very close.
Yeah, so I have a Handy Quilter Fusion, which is the largest machine at the time when I purchased it from Handy Quilter. And I remember watching a video from a Handy Quilter that says, like, you need to stand there with your two hands and relax and sort of be very fluid and move the machine. Well, actually, I use the micro handles with one hand, and I'm extremely tense when I'm like, you know, so I've really got that machine under full control, and my head is very, very close to the needle, and one hand's on the fabric and the other hand's on the handle, and I'm basically doing this over and over and over and over again. So I'm not sure I'd make a good advert for Handy Quilter about their relaxed approach to quilting. I don't know, but I love my machine. So yeah.
Do you freehand draw the swirls and feathers on the quilt, or you just draw with the needle?
I don't draw on the quilt. I just go, I ad lib with, you know, I mean, I know the kind of shape I'm going to make or the swirl, but I don't mark it out with a pen, if that's what you mean. Yeah, no, it's all freehand.
Thank you for interpreting that question.
Sorry.
Oh my goodness. So I have piles and piles of my daughter's and son's clothes in the basement. And so this is kind of inspiring me to think about maybe I can do something like this, not the portrait probably.
The pattern on the back is a really traditional pattern, or it's taken from a really traditional pattern. It's the Around the World block, which is very easy to make from strips. But I also still have tons of clothing. And so my other daughter and my son, when they heard that this quilt was going to be in a museum, they're like, when are we getting our quilt? So I'm going to have to work on theirs too. But this is the first time that this particular piece has ever been exhibited. I've been too nervous to send it away to anywhere because it means so much to me and my family. So thank you for looking after it.
Of course. Thank you for sharing it with us and entrusting it to us. It's hard to explain to those younger kiddos how more difficult things get when there are 2 and 3 kids.
Well, it will happen, but it's just a matter of time, I think.
Right.
And finding the right photo. So,
right. Yeah. Yes. Well, once you have a collection, maybe we'll do another exhibit of just portrait quilts.
Oh, I'm going to hold you to that now.
All right, so we've been through the whole of all of the quilts of these 3 artists, but we do still have a little bit of time left. So we would love to hear some questions from those of you who have joined us online today. You can use the raise your hand feature in the in Zoom meeting, or you can type something into the chat window, or at this point, you're welcome to just turn on your video and unmute yourself, and we'll converse together. And we don't need to be terribly formal about things, but I know we do have a few other members of the Manhattan Quilters Guild online with us today. So if anybody wants to pop in and comment or share anything, we would welcome you. We are going to be online one more time during this exhibit, August 24th. It's also a Tuesday. We do all of our programs Tuesdays at 12. And let's see, I don't know if I can remember exactly who we're going to be online with the next time. But it will be 3 different artists and we'll hear from them about their quilts. In the meantime, if you want to see more about all—
sorry, Megan, it will be Paula Svat, Kim Savova, and Robin Schwab.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, Mary Ellen has got her hand up, so let's see if I can ask her to unmute. And Mary Ellen, you go ahead if you can unmute or turn your video on. We would love to hear from you. Somebody else has commented that they would love to hear from Daphne Taylor about her process. Daphne, if you want to pop on for just a second, I would be happy to pull up a picture of your quilt as well, and we would love to hear.
It says I cannot start video.
Oh, is that you, Daphne?
Yes.
Okay. Ask to start video. Let's see if that works.
Ah. Sorry, I'm in the dark.
Okay, I'm going to add you to our spotlight. Which quilt would you like me to pull out, Daphne?
Either one, and I'll do my best.
Okay, this is the first one I can get up really quickly. And this is your 40 by 40.
This is the 40 by 40, yes. This is all hand embroidered and hand quilted, for those of you wanting to know technically. And being unprepared, and doing it as quickly as I can. Most of my work deals with meditation and exploring the many layers, notions of simplicity. I taught drawing and painting for my career, but I always sewed. So for me, I guess the sewing of quilts, it's been about 30 years now, and sort of my first main mission was how do I create a quilt to give me everything that the act of drawing does. And so that has been very much part of my mission in all of my work. And I go back and forth between drawing in a sketchbook of everyday life, in a very classical sense of observation drawing. And I also then bring just the whole notion of art and design into very simple quilts. My design work is very austere and simple, yet as you can see in this one, it is, I call it my bling quilt because it became very obsessed with this metallic embroidery, just layers and layers and layers. And like what Paula said, I never know what my piece is going to look like at the end. And I don't want that. I don't want to really know what's going to happen. I have a certain sense, and the circle has been predominant in all of my work. I love the symbolism that the circle is a very centering shape. It also speaks of the heavens to me. And so I'm often fascinated with history, in art history, and how artists have used symbolic shapes in their work to represent something other than the actual image itself. And in this case, the act of the leaves falling, is far more decorative than most of my work. for those of you who might know my work, but it just felt appropriate. And I also just felt like I wanted, it just felt right. So it is more ornamental than most of my work. What else can I say? I don't know. I'm happy to answer any question.
I'll try to pull up the other piece of this. I have the 40 by 40 quilts and then the others in a separate folder, but here it is.
Much of my work has always dealt with silence also, and one of my main goals has really wanted to encourage the viewer to be able to stand in front of it and to really want to, or to be pulled into the work. And so in that way that they are meditation pieces, really encouraging you to sit in front of it and to be pulled deeper and deeper. And it's certainly in my own everyday life, this is something that I greatly appreciate. And I certainly have, through art history and just through my own wandering around different sacred spaces I've always been intrigued of what pulls us in as a human being. And so this piece honors design. It's a very, very simple exploration of two beautiful shapes. I think the sliver of gold also speaks of light and of letting the light come through. It's all hand quilted, embroidered again. And this, I think, was one of the earlier pieces of where I began to use embroidery as a shape maker instead of applique or piecing of a circle. And that continues to this day that for me, embroidery becomes much more of a tool of coloring in a shape. And it's certainly one of the design techniques that I use more and more, and less piecing. I have to say I do a lot of piecing on my own on the side. It's sort of the Netflix for me. I love the making of putting lots of fabrics together. So just like Paula said that she wears black, but her quilts are full of lots of color. My work may be one piece, whole piece quilting, but I really love the tradition of hand piecing lots of little fabrics together. You just don't see it.
Daphne, thank you for popping on and sharing with us today, even though we didn't have you scheduled to do so.
My pleasure.
Beth has put in the chat window a prompt for Ruth. Ruth, would you want to talk about how, although your quilts are abstract, you bring so much of your passion for what is happening around you in the world? You want to entertain that a little bit?
I don't want to get myself into trouble, but I am very concerned about the world around us, like probably everybody else is too. And my frustration with certain happenings, I try to express them in my work. And I think one of the pieces that I made about 2-3 years ago was basically, it's 2 layers, and it's black and white, but mostly black. And it has like a stream of red pieces and textures going down. And I'm not quite sure anymore what disaster prompted me to do that, but the piece which shocked everybody was Death and Destruction Amid a River of Blood, which sort of kills the beauty of the piece. But it is very powerful, and I was very, very frustrated with the way we go about, with the ecology and climate change and wars and everything else. So I think I'm going to leave it at that.
It's important to have, I think, an outlet for those frustrations we have with the world around us, because sometimes we can feel so helpless about things, and having a way to voice that's not harmful to anyone is important.
Well, that's actually, I need to do that for my own sanity.
The piece that Ruth is talking about is truly beautiful, and the first time I saw it, I was just blown away with how beautiful and delicate it is. And then when she tells you the title, it really takes your breath away, because it makes you look at it very, very differently.
And Ruth, I didn't mean to get you in trouble, but
I'm always in trouble, so that, you know, one more time doesn't make any difference. I'm trying to be careful, and because different people have different opinions, but this is mine, and this is the way I need to express myself, and yeah, that's it.
But I think what I find about Ruth's work is that she puts her passion into the piece, but it's in an abstract way. It's through the color and through the shape that it becomes really powerful, so that it's just another way of expressing yourself without being realistically drawing pictures. And so I just love it. Anyway,
thank you so much. I am going to have to take this call, just a second. So I'm going to mute myself, or maybe Megan, you can mute myself.
I've got it. So we've had somebody who put into the chat window. She's a member of a guild here in Northwest Iowa, and they too meet on Zoom and have recently been meeting in person. She's interested from hearing from you MQG members. What do you feel makes your guild fun, or what do you love most about the Manhattan Quilters Guild or your meetings together? I'll just open it up to anybody, and then I'll see if I can unmute Ruth now.
You know, I know that, I mean, during the pandemic, when many people felt isolated, I did not. I knew that every Wednesday I would show up, and so would other people. And, you know, we would see what each other was working on. And, you know, so there is that sense that there's a commitment to the group to show up for each other. In a year and a half of Zoom, we've had some real major crises that are within individuals of the group, which, you know, is kind of shocking and, you know, surprising, that have nothing to do with the pandemic, really. And yet, I think we were able to be as supportive as possible. And I won't go into specifics, but, you know, I hope we were able to, you know, we were very aware of where each other were in that space and time during the, you know, that critical time, even though, you know, we couldn't see each other. And also during, because we were Zooming, like basically Daphne has moved to Maine from Manhattan, and we were able to really, you know, we get to know her very well. And another member was in Bangkok, and another member was on the end of Long Island, and, you know, and that was, it was an important, so I enjoyed the Zoom meetings a lot. You know, no food involved unless you brought it yourself, and that was okay. You know, drink if you wanted.
Well, and I think there's a genuine affection and interest, and I don't know, there's something really special I found. I know that I'm the newest member, but I have been extremely taken back by how much friendship and affection and everything that has been supplied by this group, and I feel very, very lucky to be a part of it.
But going back to how membership, we're not a typical guild. We're not, you know, Ruth might be a member of the Brooklyn Quilters, I think, and other people might be members of larger guilds. That's not what we are, you know, so that we are mainly a group that comes to, you know, that came together for many, many years to provide critique and support and be an art group. And so over 40 years, we have accepted members in many various ways. We used to, you know, really go through a very long process. We'd visit someone's studio, they'd have to show work, you know, we would, that kind of thing. And one of the things we learned about that is that some people are better group members than others. You know, some people have the personality for it and are kinder to each other and open to that. And so now they really will, besides that, you need to have a body of work, you know, because we will be invited to exhibit, and we do like to exhibit. We need to know that someone's going to be able to provide the photography, but we also want to know they're a group player. We want to know that someone else knows them and knows that they like being in a group. We've had situations over 40 years where, you know, we've had difficult personalities, and we're all way too polite to say anything once somebody's a member. You know, once you're in this guild, you're in this guild for life, you know, like we don't kick people out. So, and I think that, you know, we're lucky that way, that we're able to really invite nice people, you know, great people, great, clever. I mean, you don't have to be I obviously like to talk. You don't have to be someone who likes to talk so much, but you just have to be someone who likes to be in groups. Some people aren't like that.
And Meg gave a nice description, Meg Cox, in her lecture a couple of weeks ago, a nice description of how the model works for your critique group. You know, I've attended a lot of guild meetings as a presenter, and a lot of times there's almost always the show and tell aspect, but not always the critique of your work and how can the feedback, how can I take this further, what might work here, or, you know, and such. And that does take a certain combination of personalities. And I think that's part of what makes your group really unique and successful and allows you to be able to exhibit so frequently. And
so along the way, we have had people who weren't comfortable with critique, who felt it was criticism and didn't, you know, and spoke. And so when someone joins, we like to let them know that that's what we do, you know, like, are you open to it? I mean, we're never cruel, I don't think, you know, but those are women.
Wonderful. Well, we are coming up to our hour. We're just a little bit past. So I'll start closing us up unless I see something else pop into the chat window.
I think somebody wanted to see Ruth's piece and that she was talking about. And Ruth, is there any way you could put that piece onto the Manhattan Quilters Guild website? Like send it to Beth and put it up so that as one of the pieces that you show?
What, the one that I was talking about?
Yeah. You have that photograph?
You know, I'm not very good at this.
Okay.
Sorry. What I can do, I don't know whether this works at all. I could send it to Meg, but for the next one, but I don't know whether that works.
That's absolutely fine. If you're able to send it to me, Ruth, that's fine. I'd be happy to share it with your permission. Okay. And
okay.
We can coordinate through Rachel, perhaps, is maybe the best.
Oh, I send it to Rachel?
Send it to both.
Whatever, anybody. I'm happy to.
All right.
Facilitate.
All right. I make myself a note and I will do that as soon as I have the guys taking care of the windows, replacing windows. They're standing at the door, so that wasn't quite planned that way. But
so I'll see everybody at the Manhattan Quilters Guild tomorrow night. Wednesday nights are
very good. So yeah. We've talked about a couple of things. I just want to reiterate for folks to be able to find some of these programs that we've mentioned. Meg Cox's lecture from earlier this month is available to purchase as a video viewing. This particular session will be up on our YouTube page probably tomorrow. I have a meeting soon this afternoon. I probably won't get it done before that. And then Paula Nadelstern's lecture is Friday, August 6th at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. And so we will be happy to have you join us for that. Tickets to that are $10. And that is Paula's full out slideshow presentation all about the kaleidoscopic series that she has been doing for, you said 45 now pieces?
Well, I'm working on 45, so I guess up to 44 is showing, including the one that was, I just got the photographs this morning of my quarantine quilt. And also I will put in, so I did a quilt this year for my collection of fabric, and quilted a very simple quilt of patterned fabrics. And then Rachael quilted it with the most exquisite quilting, unbelievable. And I will show that in the next lecture because I just got the photography this morning, and really, it's magnificent.
Wonderful. So you can find all of these things, including the way to purchase the virtual gallery walk. If you're not going to be able to come see the exhibit in person, you can find all of this on our website, which is iowaquiltmuseum.org. You can also find us on Facebook. And if you don't yet belong to our email list, I would encourage you to do that at our website as well, so that when we release information about exhibits or programs or videos, you are among the first to know. So check it all out on our website. If all else fails, you can find my email there on the website, and I'm happy to help you. To Rachael, Paula, and Ruth, and also Daphne and Beth, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some time with us as we talked about you and your quilts. We love hearing the stories and the ideas and the thoughts that have gone into their making. That just makes them even more wonderful. Thank you to all of you who joined us in our audience today, and do be sure to let your friends know that they can still catch this video on our YouTube channel if they weren't able to join us today. Anything else before we say goodbye, ladies?
Thank you, Megan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You made it very, it was a nice conversation. You made it easy.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a lovely afternoon, everyone, and we hope to see you again sometime soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.